Um, very quickly, I have to tell you all how I met Anita. Going back to Appy, many, many years ago, I went to her session and I was in awe of everything she was saying and all the little things she brought into the session, because she always brings lots of fantastic things. And then at the end of the day, I went back to my hotel room, and there were bags of props at my door. And I opened it like, oh my God, Anita gave me everything from her session. But no, she just went to the wrong hotel room. But yeah, Anita's very, very special, and we all know her at Appy. She's part of our Appy family. Just a quick introduction. So in the 36 plus years of being in the classroom, Anita has mostly worked in CLIL. She started with the adult and secondary sector in the UK and the US, but moved to young learners in Spain. Over her 27 years in that country, she's collaborated with the same plurilingual schools and training entities. She holds a master's from the Institute of Education and is a co-tutor for modules CLIL, master's at the University of Hayat. Is that for that? Oh, I was practicing, Anita. Her latest collaborative project is You First Education, which provides training and other services. So I'm handing you over to our lovely Anita Demitroff.
Thank you so much, Anna and Zay and Sonia, for having us. And it's an honor to be here. Thank you to all the teachers who are here. And also, I'm wearing my hat as a secondary English teacher, not as a CLIL teacher. So don't think I'm going to be doing lots of electrical activities and things like that. Now, what I'd like to do is share the screen, but I'm going to go off screen as well. And the objects and things I bring in to use today are going to be things that you have at hand. So it's not going to be so techy in the sense of science hands-on. And also I'm going to link the CLIL with mindfulness, but also with the language classroom. And that's a big challenge. So let's share the screen. Okay, and get on the presentation from the beginning. So thank you again to Appy. It's always a pleasure to be with Appy teachers and the Appy organization. Even though I live in Spain, as a person in Galicia, I really feel happy on the other side of the Miño and NH Miño. So apart from being delighted to be here and wanting to mix my two passions, I want to make it justifiable to do it. So which elements of CLIL, teaching through art or science, relate to mindfulness? Well, today, Barbara talked a lot about awareness, being in the present, using your senses, purposefulness. Focusing, activating the senses goes hand in hand with observing. Observing is a skill we need for art, for science, for emotional intelligence as well, because we need to see how people are reacting to us and respond appropriately. And observing goes hand in hand with describing, which is something we always do in our ELT classes, our English classes. So we describe animals, or we describe processes, we describe people. And describing goes hand in hand with comparing and contrasting. So it's not just about describing one thing, but comparing them, not to practice, just to practice the comparative, but to get information and to learn about two objects or two living beings, like the wolf and the coyote, or the wolf and the fox. How are they different? A frog and a toad. There's a reason, a curiosity there. And comparing and contrasting goes with classifying, putting things into groups, deciding how we can classify these objects in different ways. So In some of my talks, I do bring in things that are electrical and are scientific, because we find that that really turns on a certain type of student who doesn't necessarily like English. But we could also look at, for example, and I'm going to be referring back to a lot of the activities I've already brought to Appy to look at how we make them mindful and how they relate the English language teaching with mindfulness and learning the other types of skills. So, for example, coins, I've often talked about looking at coins. Science and art help us look at things that are in our lives every day, but we might not notice with such clarity. So if we're observing, if we're mindful, for example, I've asked this before in an Appy conference, how are all coins? So imagine you as an English teacher have brought coins in from around the world, or simply escudos and the current euro, or euros from coins from the other countries, or somebody or your colleagues have been to Britain or to America and have different coins, collecting them, putting them into bags. But before children can look at them, your teenagers, ask them a question. What do all coins have in common? So I'm going to ask you in the chat to think of some common characteristics of coins. Are they all made of metal? Are they small? Are they round? Do they have pictures? So please, in the chat, if you can, write down what you think. What are common characteristics of all coins? So in the chat, I'm going to call it up. They have numbers. What kind of numbers? They're round. So imagine, this is a low language activity that's high thinking skills. And remember, Amanda McLaughlin, or Amanda Mauchlin, Fiona McLaughlin, Amanda Mauchlin said, when the language level goes down, the thought level goes up. So this is a tricky question to ask, even teenagers. And for us, okay, they feel cold or warm, possibly because they're made of metal. Now, often we think all coins are round. And for some reason, okay, surprise, surprise, some coins are square. Now, observing, looking, taking the time to look at small detail, which is something teenagers don't like doing. Look at this. I'm old, so I have old coins. What can we notice about how they represented the Queen? That she had a long reign, and on top of it, they changed how she looked. And they even had shown her on the coin as an older woman. I don't think they did the same with Juan Carlos in Spain. So that says a lot about cultural differences. And look here, here's a question. And I posed this question before, many years ago in a talk at Appy. Why well, first of all, who are the men on the left? And why are they facing to the left? And the Queen, the last Queen, was facing to the right. Can we draw a conclusion? Can we do research to find out? So that you know, those are the Queen's father and grandfather. And if you saw the King's speech, you will know that the father stepped in for his brother Edward. So there's a missing coin there, which if you have is worth a lot of money because Edward had to step down for marrying a divorcee. And it's not a question. You might draw the conclusion that men look one direction and women look in another. It's the idea that with each new king or queen, you change direction. So it's looking towards the future. So looking at coins, you find all kinds of things. And for example, you think that every country has the name or the name of the country on the coin outside of Europe, and Britain doesn't. It has the Queen or the King, and you're supposed to know that it's a British coin. So interesting things that come from everyday observation, slow observation of everyday objects, and you look at them with new eyes. And this is what mindfulness is about. Now, I looked at some projects in Australia and noticed the title, Teachers, You're Linguistic Beasts. So you have a very good eye for language. Is there a word in that title that catches your attention? And both Barbara and Chantel mentioned this aspect of making changes in our classrooms. Whole school, remember that. So the Mindful Education pilot study has a lovely report about what happened when they tried to bring mindfulness across the ages in schools and what had happened, what was successful. And there are two things that improved academic performance, and this will help your English class, but they're in very academic language. Barbara had a lovely academic approach that was accessible to me as a non-specialist. But this report has two aspects of learning. What do you think they relate to? Let's see. Inhibitory, I can't even pronounce it, control, which measures a student's ability to complete a focused task while not being distracted by extraneous stimuli. Huh? What's that about? If you teach teens, you get this all the time. And even younger learners too. To me, that is all about Pink Panther moments. And I'm going to go back to what that means. And task switching refers to students' ability to complete tasks. They require the ability to focus on multiple sources. Now, we all know Annabelle Reyes is the queen of project-based learning, and she believes that students should get multimodal information, so from different types of texts. What is this about? Focus for observing and autonomy to take that information and process it and put it in our own words, which Sonia and Alberto had taught me was agency, that if our kids can't focus, they can't observe, and if they can't task switch to go from hands-on to texty stuff to audio, they can't take that information and summarize it. So mindfulness helps us in the language classroom. Now remember the Pink Panther. I'm going to go back to it and explain what a soft toy has to do with secondary. Now, I love cross-curricular. Many of us do. Fran Sefto, for example, has brought cross-curricular in. Annabelle, Anna. So cross-curricular can be justified because it's language in context and not just English. A lot of first language teachers are trying to get together with the content teacher to use language for a reason. And hence, in Spain, there are cross-curricular projects called learning situations, but no one has really got a good handle on what that means. Not yet, we're getting there. Functions for a real purpose, describing, comparing, not to practice a particular tense, although that is a useful tool to be able to do it. It's taking information we see, feel, and read about and organizing it to compare, for example, a wolf and a coyote. There's variety with cross-curricular. So, for example, electrical stuff really makes certain types of learner happy who don't generally like English. Robotics too. They're brought into the classroom and made to feel that they can shine too, even though they're not linguistic. Ooh, sorry, there's a spelling mistake there. I thought I revised this. An antidote to screen and page. So We, since COVID, have become really comfortable going back to screen and page. And we need a more playful approach, even in our English classroom, to do something to attach our body to our minds. And this is what Barbara mentioned earlier on. And something they have in common, cross-curricular and mindfulness. What do you think these pictures represent? It goes back to what the Australians said and what Barbara and Chantel said. It's only cool if it involves the entire school. And my Russian babushkas, what do they represent? Across the ages and stages. Now, not all of us work with us in a school that has all the ages together. I think perhaps in Portugal, that's more a private school thing. In Spain, there are many rural schools that have the ages, primary, pre-primary, and secondary together, and often even adult education. So it's easier for them to try to have a whole school policy. What does this look like for mindfulness or for inclusion or for cooperative learning? And we're going to have a think about that. But if kids don't start with mindfulness in pre-primary and primary, it's probably going to be more difficult for us as secondary teachers. And remember, even though I'm known for primary and pre-primary, I started my first stage in professional life as a further education, vocational education, and secondary teacher, okay? And I still go back into the secondary classroom. So we aren't alone in our classrooms. We have to think of the wider picture, the bigger picture, and how our colleagues can help us promote mindfulness in our schools. Sandy Morel says that English teachers often feel isolated, separated. This might be a way of bringing us all together for a common aim. So, another source of really interesting information about mindfulness that has been brought into practice is the smiling mind. It's from Australia again, and I think it's probably related to that university report that I'd shown you. And they say the same thing. And it's nice to see that other people are confirming what we're saying here in Portugal, which is it has to be whole school. It's more sustainable that way if the whole school works together. English teachers can promote it and bring it forward, but we need our colleagues to work with us and the school directorship, headship, or the psychologists, the special needs teachers, and the counselor, for example. Have you heard something like this before, that it has to be whole school? Okay, I hope your picture of the other people doesn't get in the way of the screen here. Ram says the same thing about inclusion, that inclusion policies isn't just about us in our classroom, although our role is important. It's about having common policies with our colleagues and training learners. I think Barbara said training and Chantel said the word training for mindfulness, training for inclusion, for empathy, for kindness. Cooperative learning is also a long whole school process. Anti-bullying, the Kiva project in Finland, they're all interrelated and they all have to do with not just me in my classroom, although I can make a difference or I can instigate, we can as individuals instigate a change. We need to work within a structure and have support of families, the community, the learners. And Anna had a moment of saying how her son made her think. I was in a second primary classroom, and the school I work at, and I've been at for years, is in a poor area and it has high inclusion. And often children that don't work in other schools, that don't have a place in other schools, come to this school. There's a strong sense of community. And the school counselor, the head counselor who arranges all of these programs and works with us as teachers and even language assistants, they teach us how to train the children to be more kind and supportive of other children. And that's a key part of their inclusion policy. And once in second of primary, I had an experience in which Maria, who sometimes has lack of connections in her brain and starts to be very loud when the connections aren't working. The children were the ones who intervened because they knew when Maria had a bad day, one of them was assigned to taking Maria aside and getting out her tablet and working with her. So it was a humbling moment that me as a teacher thought that I was going to help with inclusion when the students themselves were better trained than I was. And another moment I had with secondary, and this is a lovely, I'm not going to deal with it here, but the map of the heart, in which children say what's important, what's very important, less important, and more important. They made maps of their hearts. Inside, they had to talk about his secret talent. And Raul, who was in 7th grade, cried because he felt he didn't have a secret talent. And the other children said, Raul, you're very good with the children who have additional learning needs. And Raul now is a nurse. So perhaps as a result of this dialogue and an English activity related to emotional intelligence, Raul has a place, and it all links together. It all comes together: inclusion, cooperative learning, mindfulness, anti-bullying. I sense there's something that's bringing us together. Now, I think Barbara, okay, my Portuguese, Barbara was incredibly clear, because even with my Portuguese level, that is probably A1, I understood most things, and it was really lovely to do that. It made me feel very happy. Barbara was so clear that it was about connecting to the body as well, mind and body. So this made me rethink about not just breathing exercises, using your senses, but about the type of science activity that is very focused in the sense of using your energy in a very specific task. And these are activities that I've used in workshops in high schools, okay? So here is what, if you can see, there's a ceramic cup, a piece of card, a clothes peg, and because this person is in the advanced stage of doing this task, a coin. The idea of putting a coin on top of this. So here I have a glass. I would never bring a glass into the classroom, but the ceramic cups that come from pudding, I imagine Baba de Camello would probably use those ceramic cups. So ceramic cup, it needs to be weighted. It can't be plastic. A piece of card and a clothes peg. And you stand the clothes peg on the cup. With your thumb and your finger, you hit the card. Ooh, very satisfying when it works. All of your energy is focused on this. Now, it seems like a paradox. Something physical like this, which can almost have a tonic effect with mindfulness, but you're focusing your energy. And it relates to physics and forces, something they repeat again and again, but often not in a practical way. And the language of this isn't just following the instructions or having a team moment, they saying, I did it, we did it. It's also about describing what happens. Your force acts on the card, the force of your fingers, the card flies out, the clothes peg falls down because of gravity. A simple explanation. Difficult in terms of mental, perhaps, if we're not physics teachers, but it ties the two together. And I'm going to do another activity like this, which involves squeezing hands. And before I go to that, I'm going to show you it. feeling. And I think, again, Barbara mentioned about connecting and feeling specific things, grounding us. And we have the breathing exercise, but also we could do drama and make sure that if a child lies down or a teen lies down, puts a book on his or her abdomen, this is a drama activity, to ensure that actors breathe from their lungs and not from their, from their diaphragm and not from their lungs. You put the book on your lung. It shouldn't move up and down. Your diaphragm should be moving. That helps with clarity and strength of voice. Or, for example, if we're talking about emotions and looking at how our face changes, what's the difference between a false smile and a real smile? What part of the body of your face can determine if someone's giving you the eyes? What specifically? You're getting close, you're warm. You know this. The eyebrow. Okay, the shiny of eyes. And that's a lovely Portuguese response, I think, because you're very warm and kind people. And your eyes are shiny when you receive speakers in API conferences, for example, and that makes us feel very, very comfortable. But it's the eyebrows. What happens to our eyebrows? When we're really smiling, our eyebrows go up. Yes, so reading faces, which is really important for emotional intelligence, or if you're going to draw, if you're going to make a cartoon strip for a story, a graphic novel, which was really big in API at the conference. Getting the expressions right means we have to be aware. And somebody said to me a long time ago that when you're angry, raise your eyebrows up and automatically it pulls up your smile. Yes, so something as silly as that is an awareness. And when we're teaching pronunciation, making students feel where those sounds are. For example, the difference between short A, apple, and U, bus. Think about it. Where is the short A in our body for apple? Ah, biting an apple, it's in your mouth. And the bus, which Portuguese and Spanish speakers tend to make bus for other words. Obviously, they know bus, but you might go oo, right? Where is it? It's in your diaphragm, but it's Pilates, and not ooh, ooh, monkey, ooh, ooh. So thinking about the body to be more aware. So feeling things and using your eyes to really see, to really look. Now, going back to another brain break, languagey and mindful activity. So this is something just like the clip, the clothes peg. This is something you can use in your classroom. You get your students into circles and they pass a squeeze. So you decide who's the captain. The captain squeezes person A, the person next to him or her, and person A squeezes B's hand, and when B feels the hand squeezed, she passes the squeeze to C, and so on around the circle until the captain says yes, because person E has squeezed his or her hand. So you're passing squeezes around the circle. This is a group activity, but it's also scientific. So it's group building, team building. It's mindful because it's focusing and you're working together, and you have to be patient. You have to work towards the squeeze or wait for the squeeze before you send a squeeze. And it's also about reaction times. So you can build something out of this because as language teachers, you can ask, are girls faster than boys? Are sporty people faster than non-sporty people? Are we faster in the morning than we are at the end of the afternoon or after lunch? So you can build language into this for observation and compare and contrast. So why are these kinds of focused physical activity, or for example, teaching how to use chopsticks? A very, very, very interesting thing. Teens aren't very good with their hands. A lot of teens are now good with chopsticks because they do eat sushi and they're more worldly than maybe 10 years ago. Teaching each other in English how to use chopsticks, for example, using your hands. These focused, what's it called? Fine motor skill activities with language also teach resilience and build self-confidence, because what you notice is little ones in preschool are used to not doing something and then learning. By second of primary, a lot of kids are too cool for school. They can't do something like use the chopsticks the first time or get the coin thing in, and they give up because they don't have resilience. Mindfulness also teaches and builds resilience. And this is a photo that Annabelle had taken from our summer camp. There were a group of schools that got together from Portugal and Spain in Tui, and they're building a marble run from Lidl. And you can see that Annabelle captured just when the bridge collapsed. And what did they do? They laughed together, and immediately, because this is taken, these are stills from a video, they started to build the marble run again. If we don't do these kinds of activities in our science classes, in our English class, in our Portuguese class, children will lose that kind of resilience and focus and attach their brain to their hands. And studies show that since COVID and even before, children are losing hand skills, which are so essential. Now, focusing, looking, you don't need all these toys either. Although, by the way, traditional toys are often available in schools and in our families. Lovely traditional toys like pulling out the sticks, Mikado, and that kind of thing. And I'm sure Portugal had marbles just like Spain, from our grandfathers or grandmothers, or jacks and other things. You can use your own body to focus. So, for example, so that English echoes what's going on. In science, children often learn about genetics. So think about your body right now, and maybe you'd have a mirror, or students would be looking at each other. Are your earlobes free or are they attached? Do you have an ear point? Do you have hair on your middle joints of fingers? And would you admit if you did? Freckles. Are your pinkies together or separate? Ooh, I have recessive genes in my pinkies. And then there are some little actions like, can you curl your tongue? And can you curl your tongue outside of your mouth? These are lovely activities from an old book called Blood and Guts. Yes, so they're good for science, or science can spill into the English class, because describing people is also about celebrating diversity. And this is a lovely way to do it. And these activities are really interesting, even though the book's old. And of course, serendipity. If there's a skeleton that's old in your school, a lovely activity is, if you can take apart the skeleton, is to ask which bones are from which part of the body and justify it. So teenagers and young learners alike say this is a toe bone or a finger bone. What? Look at your finger. Look at the bone. There are many bones in your finger. So you draw conclusions, you work together, you talk about it, and then you test. And my favorite is this little one. Do you know what this is? Do you recognize it? If you skate and you fall, this is the one that breaks. It's your tailbone or coccyx. And what's really lovely about English is that we don't like the technical words. We like making compound words. It's a Germanic trend. So it's called the tailbone, which makes students laugh. Yes. And on the chicken, the collarbone is the wishbone, the breastbone. And there's a tradition of pooling. So there's language, there's justification, which is really important. And I really believe if pupils are in a transmission-based educational system, in Portugal, they're probably a wee bit of this, just like in Spain, in Latin countries that think memorization and content's important, and they have heavy content in science. Taking this out and giving them time to use it and think about things, use these concepts like justifying what bones they are, takes time, and also possibly a little bit of talking in the first language before we go back into English, because they've never had a time to do that before, perhaps, to justify looking at bones and saying why. But you're saying, I don't want to be taking skeletons into pieces. So I want to show you other activities, including just connecting to your surroundings. My teacher colleague, Fatima, in Leicester had the children look at this playground and think about how it changed over time. And one thing we noticed that in coming back in January, the seagulls were flying really low in the playground. What do you think that's about? Any idea? Why would seagulls be flying low in the playground after January? Think, kids have sandwiches. They eat their sandwiches in break. They don't always eat all their sandwich and all their snacks. The seagulls hadn't had the children in the playground, the teens and the children, all Christmas. So in January, the seagulls are really hungry. Another thing, children, secondary often does, simple machines or rocks and minerals. Where are the rocks and minerals in our school? Which materials are used? What can we see? For example, when I have no idea about rocks and minerals, but I had to do it once as a topic. And as a result, I noticed how much mica there is in Portugal and Spain, and how so many lovely shiny stones are everywhere, and it's reflected in the building materials. Which building materials are there? Why are they used there? So you can connect to other people's curriculum and observing. Now, you know what's coming next, my favorite observing activity, which is to look, object put away, draw, look again, revise your drawing, and then draw conclusions and justify. And what comes out of the bag? Carmela loves coming to Appy. And 2 years ago, she came out of her bag, but we did the activity really fast. Now, imagine that your school has an armadillo in your laboratory. Many schools in Spain have one because people had gone to Latin America and brought back species. This is now illegal, by the way, in Spain, because having animals that are stuffed is now considered illegal because it's considered animal abuse. So I could be fined 6,000 euros, but I don't know what happens if they're used for school laboratories. Okay. Imagine pulling out something like this in your classroom. What's going to happen? Ah! And Barbara mentioned open-mindedness, and there's going to be, oh, is it alive? Blah, 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 blah. Going back to the whole school idea, if we don't train the previous years for silent moments of observation, if we don't know how to calm them when they come back from the playground, from playing football, or from a really exciting class, physical education, then we can't get them to settle down, to be quiet, to observe. So early on, this type of training takes time and it has to start earlier on. If you're lucky to get to the students beforehand, or your colleagues and you can have moments, we use the Pink Panther. So when they're young, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, we sing the Pink Panther tune, the Pink Panther comes out. And then we know that they can't. They have to be quiet. They have to look. They have to listen. They have to think. That training happens year after year. So by the time they're in secondary, you just hum the tune, or you could show the magnifying glass, and they know that there's a moment that they have to be quiet in order to observe. And as language teachers, that allows you to show, for example, something like this, and get them to see, to focus, and then use the language. So there's a quiet moment so that they can observe, get evidence, take information and interpret it later. But it's a slow process. So 5 years old do it. They forget it when they're 6, and maybe when they're in 4th of primary, they need a reminder about this and they need to do it again. And then by the time they're in 7th, they're ready to focus because they've been trained and they know something interesting is coming up as well. Now, I can imagine you're going to say, for example, my colleague used to say, you don't need an elephant to teach, you don't need to bring an elephant into the classroom to teach the color gray. And you're saying, I haven't got an armadillo, I don't want one. But you don't need an armadillo to bring an armadillo into the classroom to help learners focus. What can you use instead? We've seen the coins. You might not have a skeleton, but there are alternatives. Okay, but if you do have an armadillo, it's a really wonderful activity. So, and by the way, Amanda Mauchlin had shown about art in the classroom, the English classroom, for reinforcing vocabulary. This was an amazing piece of work by a student who did the unit on Carmela and beforehand had looked at vocabulary and tried to make it more memorable by making it artistic. And it's all related to Carmela. So, alternatives. Strange objects in your kitchen, in your house, from your travels. For example, things from your kitchen. Everyone thinks that this is for cooking eggs or for cutting, but look, it's not pointed. And it's very, very heavy. Any ideas of what it is? Look, draw conclusions. Any ideas? Something for food, yes. But which food? My favorite food. A spatula. But why is it heavy? Ice cream. Ice cream. Those of us who can't wait for the ice cream to thaw, this helps you because it works like a simple machine. It's heavy, it goes in, and it's easier to pull up the ice cream. For those of us who can't wait because we love our ice cream and we forget to take it out of the freezer to make it melt a little, to make it soft. So this is an ice cream server. And there could be other strange objects in your house that children can look at, draw, and then discuss. So look, there's a clip here. What's this for? And then they touch, they press this. It's a light so that when you're reading in bed, you don't disturb another person. Strange objects from our kitchens or from foreign places. Then another possibility is bits of objects. I went into my friend's kitchen. This is heavy. It's made of marble. Draw the part that's missing. Will your children recognize this in your classroom? Yes. I should go off screen, but I'm frightened to. Okay, it's from a mortar and pestle. Okay, in my house, I have things that are more appropriate for this. For example, pieces of torches. Torches break. Save the pieces and see if students can recognize where these objects are from. Or objects under a napkin. This is one of the easiest artistic activities you can do. So these napkins that come with tablecloth sets, I've got loads of them. I was going to give them away or make them into a quilt. You put an object under. You pink panther the class so that they're ready to be observant and not to talk. They're going to be using their senses. They put their hand under the napkin. And you remind them that when you're describing objects, you're describing material, shape, size, parts. So they're thinking, okay, this is cold. Someone mentioned cold just now. It's cold. So what's the material? Is it metal? It's ceramic. Ceramic is one of those words in English that is also used in Portugal and Portuguese and in Spanish and other languages of Spain, but it's pronounced very differently and it sounds different. So ceramics, and we're touching it, it's rough, it isn't smooth, I can feel two eyes, and so on. So then they draw what they think they're feeling, but first they've described it. That stops them from being all over the place and trying to guess as fast as possible. And of course, my auntie's frog from my bookshelf, and it has a foot missing. I try to find objects that have a flaw so that they can see if they're really sensitive with their hands, if they can see with their hands and draw that the fact the foot is missing. Or another object I use is this Russian bear, or it could be a plastic toy cowboy. How am I doing for time? Okay, now, also putting objects that they know from your music classroom, if you're in a school, that they can hear and half see. So my favorite one to use is a xylophone. All students know what a xylophone is. And all students make the same mistake when they're drawing a xylophone without looking at it. They've used xylophones, they've touched xylophones, they've seen xylophones. But if I play a xylophone in a bag, and then ask them to draw what they hear and half see, they often have the same mistakes. And that's young ones and older ones, because they're not used to observing. So, and another thing, often with little ones, for example, Fran Seftel did workshops on bees with her young learners. Can't we bring those beasties back into our older classrooms? Because again, snails in Galicia, as in northern Portugal, they're under our feet. We see them every day. Have we ever really looked at them? And when you're describing, we describe why the body parts are like this, why they behave like that. We think form and function, which gives more meaning and depth to our descriptions. So, nature, and even just going out, which I know mindfulness has a lot to do with. So you don't want to dismember a skeleton. On the internet, you can find many animal skeletons. And this is more for like 7th and 8th. It gives animals as a topic, another aspect, another perspective inside the animal. Which animals are which, and how do you know? Justify it. So the animal on the top left, what do you think it is? Why? And say, describing pictures, which is also a Cambridge English skill, Oxford skill for the exams. On the left, I can see there are, getting that correct, and using descriptive vocabulary. And then maybe talking about what you notice. For example, I'm really shocked at how the kangaroo's head is really small. And often people don't recognize penguins. And I think earlier, Chantal had penguins. We're seeing a different aspect of penguins. And this is a lovely book which deals with bones. Bones are incredible. Picture books Thanks to Appy, picture books have come into our lives. And this is one of my favorites for secondary as well as primary and adults, because it's about focusing and noticing. What do you think this is Zoom. Where do we know the word Zoom apart from these types of workshops? So children know. What do you think is the first picture? You can use your modals. It might be, it's probably, I think it must be in the chat. What do you think it is? It might be a leaf, hair. Okay, a dinosaur, a rooster. Okay, so we make suppositions, and then in the next one we see, it is a rooster. Well done. Someone guessed it. And then the next one, you can make the language go higher or lower because there's no language in this book. It's just observation. So where's the rooster? In the window. And where's the window? In the room. And where's the room? In a house? Where? On a farm? Uh-oh. In this one on the top left, you notice the brown object. Top left corner. What can that object be? Is it a tree? Is it a mountain? Could it be? So this book goes from very much up close to farther and farther, or farther and farther. And it makes you think. There's a lot to look at. And it's very, very, very challenging and delightful. It gets students thinking. Istvan Banyai has 3 or 4 books. Be careful, one of them is pornographic. Just so that you know. Of course, we should always be checking books before we use them in the classroom, but just in case, there's one that's definitely not appropriate even for secondary. Okay, so why bring in some hands-on things into your English class? Because your science teacher probably has so much content to teach. He or she doesn't have time to do the fun bits, and the fun bits really activate language. Also, it makes classrooms playful. It makes classrooms vibrant. It makes learning palpable, which Ram would say helps learning. And it makes a mindful classroom. Now, Fran Sefto brought ice to her classroom for her little ones. And we did the classic thing of touching an ice hand. You freeze water in a glove. We did that with the little ones and brought it to the big ones. And that is secondary. And we asked them questions. What do you think it is? And so on. It was like a warmer, and it's using your senses. How does it feel? It's hard, and so on. And then we did a scientific experiment, which was putting one piece of ice in salt and one piece of ice in a thermal bag and predicting results. Now, we did the look, draw, or look, think, and then put the object away. And we asked the older learners. Now, these are learners in older primary here in Spain, which are your middle school. We asked the learners, was the ice transparent? And they all said yes, it was clear and transparent. Why? Because they were using their minds, and they know water's transparent. They weren't using their eyes and their senses. So it's very interesting how being wiser in the sense of knowing more information can stop you from being wiser in a mindful way. And so here's a drawing of a child in second of primary and the xylophone. And here's an older child. Same mistake. Xylophones have different sizes. That's how they produce the scale of music. Children made them in both ages, and adults too, like a piano. Isn't that interesting? And we realized our mistake after, and it's a nice warmer if you're going to do something on music, because it makes you aware that you really have to look. Now, Using our senses, activating our senses, nothing better than chocolate. If there is no allergy, and often children are allergic to nuts, which makes this impossible. Using our senses for chocolate, doing a comparative testing study, giving points and deciding which is the best chocolate out of their brands, and testing to see if their favorite chocolate, and usually in Spain it's Milka, is better than the other brands. And it's quite interesting because often they end up liking Lindt instead. Now, deciding beforehand what the senses words are. Good chocolate should look, smell, taste, feel on the tongue. Taste like, sound like. When you break chocolate, it's a sign if it's good chocolate. What does good chocolate sound like in your mindful mind? Hear a piece of chocolate breaking. And use your mind to say, okay, let's compare the cost using unit cost. Now, I did this in Vienna for Annabelle's workshop, and I did this in Abrantes. So I'm sorry if I'm repeating for people recently from this year. So comparative testing and a mindful activity. It gets even the most unengaged students involved. If there are no allergies, and also you can ask families to bring in the different chocolate. Save the shopping receipts to look at the unit cost, because then they also use their brains to calculate. Lindt chocolate is very, very expensive. Is it worth it? A good debate. And they're using comparatives and superlatives and working in groups. Alternatively, allergies, which art material is best for mixing colors? What can we use? Pastels, pencils, crayons, and to draw conclusions and present them. You can even use M&Ms, another reason to use chocolate in your classroom. Now, my last activity is this. It's very mindful, but it's not mindful in the sense of connecting with reality. It's mindful as in using your inner eye, and it's called the color poem. It starts, and I'm going to send Appy the instructions for this. I'm sorry I didn't have time to do this yet, but I will upload through Anna and Jose or Sonia. The first part is to match the words that rhyme. And I would prefer using pictures, so they're not using phonetic clues, but what they think the sounds are. And then we use our minds. And this idea of the inner eye, there's a lovely book, Art and the Child. And this lady worked in the ghettos of Glasgow, Marion Richardson, and got children. She wasn't so fussed about the techniques of drawing that came, but to get them to relax and use their mind's eye. So it's a very beautiful, real story about children. Now, using our mind's eye, close your eyes if you're not already sleeping, and I'm going to read a poem. It's a word, it uses a word that we should be using more in our classrooms because representation and analogy are really important. But often we use like for tastes and not like as in this is like another object because, okay, how are they similar? So imagine, it's like a winter sky. What color are you imagining? It's like a winter sky. It's like a cat's eye. Can you see the gold? It's like a princess's hair. It's like the queen's chair. Can you feel the velvet? It's like my favorite fruit. It's like my grandfather's suit. Simple, simple poem. But the idea that already, first of all, you're constructing the poem by matching the words, and then you're taking out the words and building the lines. And from that, you're imagining the colors. And again, like, how kind, thank you, should be taught from the early ages and brought up the ELT classroom. Like, as in analogy, is really important for art and science and explaining yourself when you don't have the vocabulary. So it's also a learning to learn tool. So Before they make their posters in teams, they decide how they're going to do the lettering, and we give them different options on a menu. So they can look at different fonts. And possibly with your colleagues from art or in other subjects, because they're always making posters, you can start doing this from one class to another, giving them choice and having them justify which kinds of letters and what kind of shape are you going to make a shape poem around the word, the object, and how are you going to produce the pictures? And again, collaborating with your art teacher. So giving them options in a menu, the color poem menu. So are you using mosaics? Are you using collage? To remind them of the techniques they've practiced. So they get together in groups, they decide, and they also decide how they're going to put their poem together, how they're going to share the work. Be careful, often they spend too much time on letters. So they also know how to think about how they manage their task. And then they also have to share how they see in their mind's eye. For example, the grandfather's suit or my favorite fruit, distribution of work. And then they present their project, the color poem. We've done this from 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. I've not done it with 9th and 10th, but I think it could get even more elaborate as we go on. And they give a presentation and they read the poem. And it produced really interesting work, the color poem. So, and I'm finishing on time, what do all these objects have in common? They're English teaching activities. What do all these activities have in common? They're all English teaching and they've been used in the secondary classroom. They're hands-on, but not overly fussy, some of them. They're linked to the curriculum, which is really, really important and fun because you learn too. I've been in the classroom 36 years. I'm getting bored with some of the standard English stuff that we use. It's nice to link to the curriculum because then you can learn too. It provides opportunities for communication, sometimes in the first language to get their ideas together and then restate in English. Students need that and it makes a more inclusive classroom. And some activities involve quiet thoughtfulness or focused physicality, which is mindful. Thank you. If you would like the handout, please write to me or I will send it to Anna so she can put it up. But I'm also traveling, so it's been a bit hairy. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh, that was wonderful, Anita. Thank you so much. You've just sorted out a problem for me. I was going through, you know, that drawer we have in the kitchen where everything ends up there. And then we don't know what to do with it, right? So I'm at that phase where I have to get rid of all that junk. And it's like a can opener that lost a piece, you know. So what a wonderful drawer of material to take into the classroom, with the missing pieces and guessing what it's for.
And I'm aware that English teachers prefer doing emotional intelligence or certain types of art because that's her own taste. And I hope that some people feel persuaded to go outside of their comfort zones as English teachers in order to do something sciencey or to bring in bones, because it really does engage your difficult classes. And it's fun.
It's absolutely fun. Also, noticing, teaching our learners how to notice is such an important skill, because it also sparks curiosity, isn't it? And it's curiosity that makes us learn. So looking at those tiny little details, I think it's just amazing. And it's something I need to bring back into the classroom, the noticing. Thank you so much. I wonder if there are any questions.
Guys, do you feel it's a challenge to do some of these activities? Because secondary English teachers love English and love art and love emotional intelligence. Do you find some of these activities a bit overwhelming?
Teaching is always challenging. And I think as English teachers, we actually appreciate challenge. And I think challenges I think it makes us more creative.
So if anyone needs help or support for putting these ideas together, contact me. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anita. That was
Bye-bye,
wonderful.
everyone.
Thank you very much, Anita. Thank you. What a plethora of ideas and activities and so on. So thank you very, very much. In this case, I don't think curiosity killed the cat. So it didn't kill the cat at all. So thank you very, very much for this. And
sorry, Zach, can I just share a little? Anita just reminded me of something, just a quick anecdote. Once my students, I think they were B2, C1, I can't remember, they were trying to explain why they love the subject of physics. Now, I can't find anything to love about physics, but they were trying to convince me that it's fascinating and that we should all love physics. And it was just, I found it so interesting the way they were trying to convince me, but they were lacking that science, they were lacking the language. They knew all about what they were learning in class, but they didn't have the language. So for homework, I let them find that language. And the following lesson, they came up with all these arguments, bringing in all these things that they were learning in another subject to try and convince me that physics is very important. I'm still not very interested in physics, but I do understand now the importance of physics.
And the other thing is, it's often not the technical stuff, it's the simple stuff explaining, which is really challenging.
Absolutely.
Like, why does the clip fall in its gravity? Yeah.
Yeah, they were telling me about a chair. It was all about a chair.
Wow.
And finally I understood it the following day, because at home they did all that research and they practiced. But it was interesting to link the subjects as well and share their passions from other subjects and enable them to bring that and talk about that in the classroom. So thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.